Hello and welcome again to the second exciting installment of Apollodorus's Bibliothèque. I'm afraid I'll be shuffling papers for a while till I get back on track because this is the third time I've done this video. It cut out a couple of times, so we'll resume where we were last time with poor Polyidus. He answers the call to rescue young Glaucus, and his reward for such kindness and for such ingenuity in answering the riddle results in his imprisonment. He's thrown in with the corpse of Glaucus, and don't come back without my living son. The same kind of combination of cruelty and love that we saw in Agenor at the beginning of the Minoan material, and so it becomes a kind of a motif. We've called such recurring stories mythemes. Another word for them for this sort of phenomenon from the structuralists, an approach to mythography in the early 20th century, is a doublet. The one story is called a doublet of the other. So Polyidus is stuck there, and so here Polyidus shows the importance of his ingenuity, and the significance of his ingenuity. He represents the Cretan civilization in general, called the Minoan civilization after Minos. That word for the civilization was discovered by the British archaeologist who most studied the Minoans, and he excavated the palace at Knossos on Crete, and his name was Sir Paul Evans. Yeah, Sir Paul Evans. Yeah, so the Minoans. The Minoan civilization was technologically advanced compared to the rest of the Aegean civilization, and so when they came into the Aegean and when they colonized Crete, then they represented a great advance. And I think some of these myths represent this. I think that the character of Daedalus represents it. But one thing to be kept in mind for all of these stories is that we are seeing them through an Athenian lens. We are seeing them from the Athenian point of view. So we have this advanced civilization that would be to say that would be to praise the Minoans, but from the Athenian point of view, the Minoans had conquered them, and so they we give the credit to an Athenian because Daedalus came in and showed them all of this stuff. So, and similarly, I think the way that Minos is presented as Minos the Meanie is very much an Athenian point of view. So Polyidus from here then shows really he becomes a kind of an emblem of the scientific method, because he makes observations and applies his observations. He's down there alone with the spiders and the snakes, and a snake comes along and he's afraid of the snake, so he kills it. And then the snake's mate comes along, and the snake's mate looks at the dead snake and goes, that's what the snake says, because snakes don't talk, they just say like that. You know, if it's cartoon, it's like exclamation points coming out of his head. Okay, and then he slithers off, because that's what snakes do. They slither, and he slithers back with an herb in his mouth, and he drops the herb on the dead snake, and the dead snake revives. Miracle. And so applying that observation, then Polyidus takes the herb and applies it to to Glaucus. Glaucus it revives, and they live happily ever after. Okay, that leads us then to the stories of Theseus. Theseus is connected to the Minoan stories because he comes to Crete in order to defeat the Minotaur, and that story is told in more detail by Plutarch, so we will save that until Friday's class. And of course, by the time you read this, you will have already been in Friday's class by the time you see this video. We turn then to a second Athenian connection, which actually precedes Theseus in time, is Minos' defeat of the Athenian king Nisos. And here again, this is another example of the Athenian point of view because that's how we received these myths, right? The Minoans were the pinnacle of the Aegean civilization in the late Bronze Age. And then the Athenians rise to power, and so now we receive these stories of the great civilization of the Minoans through the Athenians. So we get the Athenian point of view, and I think that's what we have in Nisus, because the reality in time, I was going to say historical reality, but technically it wouldn't be historical because it's before history was written down. So it's prehistoric in that sense. But sometime way back in the late Bronze Age, in a way that has not been recorded in objective print, only now in these stories handed down, which, as we say, are colored by one or another generation. Whatever happened, however it happened, there was a defeat of Athens, or the Attic civilization, by the Minoans. Now, that defeat need not have been military; it could have been simply economic. Okay, but however it happened, it happened. But the Athenians want to remember it this way: they have a powerful king, Nisus, but the Minoans could not have defeated Nisus without treachery, and so that's why they build a story of treachery and a story of miscegenation. That's another mytheme that comes in here. The term is in your glossary, M-I-S-C-G-E-N-A-T-I-O-N, M-I-S-C-E-G-E-N-A-T-I-O-N. Miscegenation, the mixing of races, this taboo. And we see that in the story of Nisus and Scylla, because Nisus is defeated through the treachery of his daughter. And miscegenation stories in Greek mythology will usually involve the two generations in this way. In a way, the taboo is against sleeping with the enemy. That's maybe one way to think of miscegenation. In exactly the same way that in the Old Testament we have the story of Samson and Delilah. Delilah was a Philistine, and so that was his first mistake. From one point of view, the story is in fact a warning against miscegenation. Okay, which sounds very ethnocentric. We have to remain. We have to keep our culture pure. But keep in mind, this is a religion too. Keep in mind that the ancient Hebrew people saw what happened to the kids who abandoned the faith and went off and did all kinds of horrible things. And so it's rather like the old Jewish proverb that from Orthodoxy, that the definition of a good Jew is someone whose grandchildren are Jews. That shows your devotion if you were able to transmit the faith to two generations. And so the idea is that, but in terms of, but of course, we come to these stories from a post-romantic point of view, and we see the love story, and we see Romeo and Juliet, and so we see it as a good thing. But from the point of view of of the Minoans, right? Um, Nisus or from the Athenians, we should say, Scylla, by sleeping with Minos, betrays her father, right? Because she's literally sleeping with the enemy, which means that you're turning your back on your country, which is your father, if your father's the king. You are turning your back on your country's gods and your country's laws, and so it is an act of treason, giving aid and comfort to the enemy, I suppose. Uh, so, um, so what happens then is that um, uh, by seducing Scylla, Minos discovers the secret of Nisus, which is, and here's another connection with Samson, right? The source of his strength is this hair. Now, in Samson, it was the hair in general, and not cutting his hair. But with Nisus, it is one purple hair. He was the first punker in the center of his head, and when that is plucked, he is powerless. And so Minos learns that secret and defeats Nisus. Okay. As we said, we're going to skip over the Theseus part, but we'll go ahead to a couple more stories about Daedalus. We've already seen Daedalus, but he shows up again, 112. It's chapter or book 1, chapter 12. On being apprised of the flight of Theseus and his company, Theseus left after slaying the Minotaur. Minos shut up the guilty Daedalus in the labyrinth with his son Icarus. And this is a kind of a universal myth, right? Because what we see here is very very typical human behavior, right? You tell your kid, don't fly too high. Whatever you do, son, don't fly too high, or the sun will melt your wings. But kids think they can fly as high as they want to, right? They think that they're gonna live forever. They think, what the heck does Dad know, right? He's the previous generation, right? He was born in the 20th century. What the heck does Dad know, right? And so what happens to kids who say that? They die. That's what happens. But I'm over that now. So we'll just move on. Icarus goes the way of all flesh, and so Daedalus goes off in sadness. But there's one last Daedalus story, and I like to point out this one because again, we just talked about the concept of the doublet, and here we have another doublet, although it's a doublet for a story that we haven't talked about in this video. But through the mysteries of time travel, by the time you look at this video, we will have already discussed it. How does that work? Well, it's a big mystery. It's time travel. It's one of those time paradoxes. You didn't think Dr. Holmes could go back in time, did you? But it's true, because I'm going to finish this video, and I'm going to go back in time for Friday's class. Okay, so but the doublet is Daedalus threading a seashell, a snail shell. Okay, and so, well, what is that a doublet of? Where did that appear before? Well, if you think of the Theseus material, and it's also here in Apollodorus in truncated form, right? But it's the story of Ariadne helping Daedalus through the maze, the labyrinth, with a thread. Okay, and he just follows the thread when he's done. So in fact, it's structurally it's the same story, very different in details, but the structuralist, those guys at the beginning of the 20th century, Levi-Strauss and those guys, they looked at mythology in terms of larger structures, and they saw similarities that aren't that aren't important if you look at the detail, or that aren't visible when you look at the details. Okay. Well, this has been very pleasant, but that's all we need to do. So we've covered this material in less than the 50 minutes that we would have had in class. And so thank you for joining us. I'm sure there's stuff that I left out, but we'll get it in class. This will at least catch us up. So thank you for your patience, and we'll see you in class. God bless you.